We're continuing on in our TopRc model project from Gator Rc. Let's go. We're currently working on this TopRc Model Odyssey, of course from Gator Rc. And you want to see what's going to separate the men from the boys? When you have to make a hole in this beautiful fiberglass composite stab or rudder and make it look like this, it's a daunting task, and I'm going to show you how. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting all of our control horns ready to be put in. And what I'm going to do is I want to paint all these, and I'm going to paint them galactic silver. I think that silver will blend nice with this aircraft all over the place, and I don't have to worry about trying to match certain colors and they're not all just black. It'll give a little pop to it. But what we have to do, and which is really nice, they've already drilled some holes in there for epoxy to weep into. But in order for this to paint to stick on this G material, I want to light scuff the whole thing. But here where we're going to go into the surface, we really want to get that cleaned up. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to use these skewers to hold right there, and we're going to pop these into said box like that. We're going to get them all painted. So let's go. All right, so we're going to have to go ahead and cut down our horns because you'll see that they fit in there. They're going to be too long and stick out. So one of the easiest ways to be able to do this is just to place it there along the side like so, and just draw a line right down there at the edge. That'll give you a good starting spot so we know where to trim those down to. All right, so you can see how we got one of them in there, and that thing's nice and flush. So now I can use that for measurement. Obviously, we have 4 of these to cut. So now we're going to go ahead and apply tape to the outside of all the horns. We got everything sit in there the way we like it. And I go just outside of the horn a little bit. And I know that we're going to be placing the epoxy over some paint, and I'm okay with that. It's just mainly for aesthetics. If I can, I like to run just a little piece down through there if I can. It's going to be too wide, so we'll have to use something smaller. But otherwise, we're just going to tape off all of our horns. We're going to get those things drilled, and then we're going to epoxy everything into place, and we're going to set in ball links when we go to epoxy them in. When you do dual horns like this, you want to have everything lined up. So you want that ball link already in there, squeezing everything in the position you want it, holes lined up, holding that while all the epoxy dries. So let's get the rest of these taped off, and then we'll get to drilling some holes. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop out one horn here at a time, and we're going to punch it. And when you ask why, because this thing came with 2mm hardware, and as much as I like the hardware and I think it's going to be okay, when I go, I think it's going to be okay, I'd rather not. So we are upgrading like I always do. We are going to use steel or titanium push rods, and we're going to go with Dubro heavy duty monster links up in here for those. So that's going to keep this super robust, which is what we want, right? We don't want to doubt it. So those holes needed to be opened up so I can use the linkage that I want to use. And I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to get all this put together and squeeze, so that way when we go to epoxy all this stuff together, it dries as one unit. So let's do all the others. All right, we're going to use some Hysol, some 9462. This is long cure epoxy, so it's going to take a little bit. And on this plane, we want this thing to set overnight and really cure those in. Get them holes good and cleaned out. And we're going to take some of this and we're going to get it worked down in there. So I usually let that last bit heavy on the top so I know it's going to push down in there. I know there's already a good bit worked in, but that way when I push the horn down, it'll push a little bit out, which I want some coming up and out of there. And on here, we just put a little bit of a coating, so that way we know that that's good and soaked in. And in we go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and thread in our 3mm bolt. All the way through. I really don't even need to put a nut on that because that's nice and tight. So now we know that that's all lined up. And now we're going to work our epoxy here on the fillets. And all I do is I use a straw and I drag a straw over it. All right, so let's talk about one of the most absolutely daunting things in this hobby altogether. That is taking a beautiful composite model and going from this to that. To have a nice clean servo cutout can be an absolute task. Well, I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's get into that. In my Odyssey jet, I'm going to be using the Frsky 5455 servos. Now, these are the exact servos, so if you were to use F-port capable protocol in your radio, you can actually get telemetry data out of this, like voltage and amperage, so that's really cool. Comes with a bag of hardware here and a bunch of miscellaneous arms, so you can choose to do whatever. In my model, I'm going to be using 1.25" arms. I really think 1 inch would work. I like the geometry look better of 1.25", so we'll see how that pans out when everything's together. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our little rubber grommets here. And as many times as I've covered this, I still see this all over the place. This is very common. Which way do the brass inserts go? And the brass inserts have the hat portion facing down, so that way it doesn't dig into the wood and wind up going through it. So what I do is I take one of these little hex drive drill bits, an absolute cool trick I learned a really long time ago. Put them on that thing, and now you don't need to fight. You can just literally keep pushing and working. It gives you room to wiggle. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, hat's down at the bottom, right? So now we have to go ahead and we have to mount that way down in the inside of there. So in order to do that, we're going to use long hemostats. I'm going to drop it in. The correct orientation is going to be gear away like that. So let me get that dropped in, and then we're going to drill some holes. Also, in case you guys are interested, 25 tooth spline, a nice aluminum case on these, and I'm going to be running these at 7.2. At 7.2, these things put out about 560 inch-ounces of torque, which will be plenty for this model. And the reason I like a little bit more is because you never know how long the model's going to last, and it'd be cool to use these in many other projects down the road. I like more power than less, but the telemetry is cool, as well as obviously the power. So obviously always available over at Gator RC, but these are the Frsky exact servos, the 5455, as you can see right there. All right, so there you can see we have our servo mounted down on the inside. and the gear is away from the linkage. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our drill with that long extension on that drill bit, and I'm sure they make really long, tiny 1/16 or 1/32 bits. I don't have any, but that's what we're going to use, and it works just fine. So let's drill those. Now go ahead and put those servo screws in and hold that servo into position exactly where you want it. Now let's take our servo arm and we are going to mount it sideways with the servo. So this way. Let's go ahead and put that screw in there. And this ain't a permanent install because we're going to pull that servo back out and we're going to wick some thin CA in around that wood, stuff like that. I also had to take some of that chinking and grind away just a little bit so that way that servo fit in there real nice. But okay, so servo arm is in there where we want it. So you are going to need to pick yourself up one of these. Harbor Freight machinist slide rule, they're $1, okay? And we're also going to need 2 different color rolls of tape. So what I am going to do is I am going to take this thing and I am going to stick it in there right about where that bolt is, and basically you can pull this whole slider back like that, put that flat portion down on the servo arm, and just slide that rule until it touches. Not worried about numbers, I'm basically just worried about distance. So from there, I'm going to take my wide tape of whatever color, and we're going to eyeball this back to where the center was on that bolt and how that servo sits in. Remember, it's going to be crooked, and we're going to about center that tape just like that. Okay, now that's going to be to keep our paint from flaking when we're grinding. So now what we want to do is we want to come back to that bolt area, and I want to be a little bit more precise. I want to make sure that I got the right angle. Come in here, make sure that if you're straight like this, that really won't work out as well. You have to kind of look at the way the servo is angled, and we want to go in there from that area. And now that we have that distance off the bolt, I'm going to come in here just like that, there, and I am going to take a marker and I am going to go ahead and make that line right there. And now I'm going to come about 3/4 the distance down on the servo, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so now that I have those 2 red lines right there, that is the travel of my servo arm, and that's why I put it in there sideways. So that's going to be the very face. Now, off of that face, I still need a little clearance. So I am going to go ahead and put that tape on just like that. Now, if you have another servo arm, you can go ahead and lay that in there the same way, right up against that one. And now we're going to take this one and we're going to position that right in there like that. So now if I eyeball right down through here, that little X is where my bolt is. That's center. So we're not going to go all the way down to there, and we're not going to go all the way to there. We're going to basically start small. We can always go bigger, and we're going to go about right there as far as spacing goes. Okay, and that should get us to where we need to be. I like that a good bit. And now we can just recheck with it. A servo arm, pretty acceptable right there. So if you want to test your marks, get yourself a really, really small Dremel tip, just like that one. And we're going to come 1 hole. And we're going to go right on that line, a little bit in. we can always make do and adjust from there. So it's just the way of checking. Now you can use a piece of wire, toothpick, whatever you want to, and I'm just going to push that thing down through there, and we are going to see that we are pretty spot on right there at the edge of that servo arm. So by the time I slide this front just a little bit, we should really be right on the money. Okay, now let's go ahead and start grinding. All right, there you can see we have our slot more or less ground out. So we're going to go down in here and we are going to pop this servo arm out. There's the screw. And now we're going to fish that from the inside out. See how we kind of fish that through? And now we're just going to go ahead and make sure it fits over our bolt. So I can see that backside wise we're a little tight, front side we're a little tight, so we're going to go a little wider, fine tune it. And that material comes off really, really fast, so you want to be super careful there. You don't want to go nuts. All right, and there you go. So that is a super clean looking slot that you can adjust for the length of your throw. I don't make them super big right now until I figure out how much throw I need exactly when I set up the model and linkage and stuff, but as we peel that off, look at how clean that is. So now here is another tip that I will give you guys. I bought a set of these things from Harbor Freight. They're a couple bucks. So there are some nice files. When you use files on composite, don't like this. To clean up that edge nice and smooth, just drag it back and forth like that, and you won't rip the paint off. If you have to focus on an area a little more, look how nice and smooth that cleans those edges up. Okay, so question is, okay, well then what do you do about the round ones? You get a round file and you just do this. There you go. Look at how nice and clean. Very, very, very little chipping. So I love it. I hope that helps you guys to make super clean servo arm exit holes. If you didn't find that tip crazy useful, I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, I'm sure you did. Smash that thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. Appreciate it. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat the exact same process with the rudder. All right, in the next step, we have to take our turbine mount from here to there because we need to bring it in. We are running the Xicoy 132 in there, so this thing needs that extra mount space on the inside. So I really debated whether or not I was going to make a whole plate like this or if I was just going to do the square. So you can imagine the square coming off of there versus that plate. I prefer this look. So with that being said, how do we do it? Basically, easy way, I'm going to take a piece of sticky back sandpaper and I just laid it. This stuff is tacky, but it's not overly tacky. I lay it over the top and pull the pattern off once I have it cut to shape. That thing's going to look like this, and then I go ahead and I just take a Dremel cut-off wheel, cut it out, sand it down until you get to that. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and epoxy that thing into place right there, so that way it holds nice and firm, and then we will use through bolts, nuts on the back side to mount our turbine in there for easy removal, and the thrust tube will just get mounted in there like normal. Now, there's also this thing out there where these planes tend to climb on full throttle. I'm not going to worry a whole lot about this until I fly mine and I see what I get, because there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. If you want to change thrust tube alignment, if you want to change the turbine height, if you want to put in a mix, I'm not going to worry about any of that Now, I'm going to build a model, I'm going to fly it, and I'm going to see how it turns out, because we don't know anything about that structure in there. And we could go ahead and check it with the thrust line of the plane and make sure that that's nice and straight. And I'll probably do that at some point during this build, but for now we're going to mount it with this expectation. All right, we're continuing on. We have our arms picked out. All right, we're going to use 1-inch arms on these. That seems to be plenty. We have our grooves, the preliminary cut done there now. And I'm going to take you around here so you can see in the inside. So down in there, hopefully you can see that we have, let me grab my flashlight. That can even help a little bit more. There we go. So the screw hole you could see at the top right and the bottom left are bigger than the others. Before we drip CA into those mounts to make sure that they're hardened really well, I'm going to run our servo screws down into those, take them out, drip some thin CA down into there. I'll show you how I do that so we don't make a mess all over the place. And then we'll get those servos installed, arms on, and we'll continue on with radio setup. All right, so what I like to do is I like to use thin CA with a long pipette, and hopefully you can see those holes right there, and then you can just come down into, put a couple drops around that hole, let that stuff solidify there and strengthen up that area. If for any reason it's just too difficult to get into an area and you don't have a long pipette, get yourself a wire rod as such, put it down into the area that you need it, and then just go ahead and put some thin CA on this thing, let it run down into the area you need, and you're all set. There you go. Hope that helps. We're going to do this to all of our surfaces, rudder and elevator, and we're going to get to it. All right, now that we have our servo mounted in there, I have my AR smoothflite set up, so I'm running 2 TDR10s. For now, we have the AR smoothflite pack in there, but that's what I'm going to be running for receivers, and then S-bus over to the AR smoothflite because we have 2 receiver ports there going into this unit. So I like the redundancy, I like the dual batteries going into that, and I'm very familiar with this system, so I like it a lot. And with the 2 2.4 signals and 2 900 megahertz all simultaneous, we should be good. So anyway, I have my elevator on here set up as 1 port in, split to 2, and the way I always set mine up is with the battery leads going forward, and then I use the ports in the back of the plane. So that would be elevator, 1 for rudder, then I would have inboard flaps, outboard ailerons, and so forth going up. So it usually makes it easy to signify side of the plane and what surface is going to be where on here. So I have this set up right now, as you could see or hear. So elevator servo is neutraled out, again 1-inch arms. So now that that's neutral, we're going to go ahead and put in our arm and get our linkage hooked up. And if you have a horn or a servo arm that has 2 screws, a pinch screw and then the main screw, put the main screw in first. Again, we have Loctite on there, and then once that's snugged up, then go ahead and snug up your pinch screw. Now we're going to go ahead and thread on our upgraded hardware. I'm using steel turnbuckles, or push rods if you will, and 3mm Dubro monster ball links. Is it overkill? I don't know. I just look at it this way. I know if my linkage is good and strong and I'm using great servos and it's built the right way, then I shouldn't have any failures in that area. So all right, now we're going to go ahead and use our anodized hardware, and we'll go ahead and install this stuff. All right, now what I've gone and done while I'm here is I've set up the throws on my AR smoothflite to limit. We're only at 1 inch, which is going to be 1 inch arms, more than enough throw to get everything you want, but I just want to make sure that I'm maxing out, but I'm not also damaging the airframe. So I have it set up now with limitations, and we should be good. That maxes out in both directions. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this linkage apart now that that's set up, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing epoxied into place. All right, now it's time to go ahead and get this rudder hinged into place. I'm going to start off by taking a little bit of this is just oil, and we're going to drop this in the joint, and what that's going to do is keep anything from really settling in there and causing me problems. So normally, if you hadn't tried it, in a lot of my other videos I've used it, I use Gorilla Glue on Robart style hinges, and it works extremely well because it really swells around the wood with a little bit of moisture. And I've had airplanes that have lasted 10, 15 years, whatever, even more, and I never had a hinge problem with any of those. So I encourage you to do that, but one of the things I do around the covering in that area is I'll put a little bit of oil or Vaseline on the covering, so that way if you go too heavy with that stuff and it oozes out onto your covering, it could be kind of unsightly and very difficult to get off. So what I would say is just rub it with little Vaseline or oil if you want to go that route, and then it'll wipe right off. It'll flake right off, which is really nice. But in this model, I only have 3 Robart hinges. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use some slow cure Hysol, so that way I have time to work with it. So we're using Hysol 9462. And we'll squeeze some of this stuff into a cup. So I guess you can call this 2 mixtures, 1 cup. Yeah. Don't need a ton. Here's a trick my buddy showed me, Ronnie. I love the stuff he shows me. Color code your cap so that way you're not mixing the stuff as it goes back on. You ever wonder why your stuff's all gooed up and never comes apart? That's why. So we're going to mix this stuff up. All right, now let's get it worked into our hinge pockets. Now one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and wipe a little bit on that surface, so it's not dry going in. Never want to shove it in the hole dry. The gooier the better. So now we're going to take that. Now these do not recess in, and I usually twist as I go in. So I do that. They do not go all the way in. They just go to the edge of the knuckle, if you guys can see, like that. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're going to repeat the process with all of these. We're going to make sure we don't put them in too far and that we have the flexibility we want. And the most important thing as we go together with this is that we maintain that gap at the top. Don't put it in so tight it rubs, but you also want it all lined up. All right, now we have all of our pockets made up. That short cutoff one is down there at the bottom. And we're going to slide all those together. And then we're going to make sure that that thing has the spacing here at the top we talked about so it doesn't rub, that all of our hinge pockets sit in there all the way, that you have this lined up. Spacing is good there, so we got to pull that kind of down and out a little bit, and that you have the full deflection you need. So when all of that's set up, then you can tape it into place. All right, we're getting ready to install our fuel tanks, and I'm not going to use the 2-tank setup that came with this. Now this thing is, you could see, pointed. It fits right into there, into those intake tunnels, Instead, I like the little bit of extra security that Kevlar tanks offer, and these are from CM Jets. They're out of Spain, I guess. So they're kind of the shape. I don't really understand why they didn't just shape them just as these are. They sit more upright, but I'm going to be running that tank, which is larger, and then I'm going to be running a smoke tank which sits up on top of those ducts and sits under the turtle deck here. So that fuel tank doesn't sit all the way back, and I have to find a way to mount it, and you're really kind of limited for space in here where it sits, but I need a foam backer to keep it from wanting to slide. Although I'm going to just Velcro it to the bottom, and that'll work just fine. I'm going to create a mount for the top, so it's going to be secure. I don't want it to want to pivot in there, so I'm trying to figure out what the lightest option is, and this is just a piece of packing foam that I laid underneath like that. I got the actual shape that I needed, and then I'm just going to carve that and glue that right in the back, so that way when I go ahead and I put in my tank, this tank slides in this way. Then you have to tuck the bottom down like that and drop it in. You could see that weird space in the back. I just want to stop it from doing this in there, just to keep it nice and secure and have a little bit of cushion. So that's what the goal is. And then once I Velcro that, I'm going to put a strap across the top. The tank is going to be very secure. It's not going to go anywhere. I don't have any worries. And then it's kind of insulated a little bit from rubbing everywhere all the way around. And then the smoke tank will go in and sit up on the top. So that's what we're going to do. Let's carve that out and get it mounted. All right, if you look back in there, you can see my little foam block in there, that piece that just moved. So on a trial fit, I like how that thing fits in there, and you can see that that's what I'm pushing against and not the intake duct. So, and then that gives me a little bit of clearance here, so I'm not rubbing. I like it. Let's start getting it fit for some Velcro. All right, simple Velcro. We're going to go ahead and put that in there, and then we'll make the mount. For my smoke tank, I'm going to mix up some epoxy, and I'm going to just use a piece of carbon square. I don't anticipate there's going to be a lot of force on this thing. I already shaved down that former to fit the smoke tank back in here perfectly, but I'm going to use this piece of carbon square as a stopper. And we're just going to epoxy that thing in there so that way that tank can't slide back or doesn't want to slide back at all. And we'll just let that sit in there and dry. Now that the tanks are secured on the inside, I had to find a way to secure this so I'm not worried about it going up. I'm not worried about back, but up with any type of pressure. So for the sake of, like, I'm doing things to try and save weight in this aircraft, I don't want to put in a bunch of crap in there in order, like, to jack it back up in order to make brackets and make things complicated. So what I came up with is using a piece of carbon rod, and I drilled an angle here, and now I am going to take a piece of carbon plate recessed, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy this in on the inside of the plane. So what I'll eventually have is a tube, or this carbon rod, that slides in at an angle, goes across the tank, and slides in here, and then I'll epoxy on a piece of washer or something on there so I don't have to worry about it going in any deeper and rubbing the inside of the fuse. But then I'll cut it off flush here. The nose goes on and it bolts there, so the nose will secure it on this end as well. So I'm adding really minimal weight to get a really nice hold down in there. And then for the smoke tank, I'm just going to put a piece of foam at the top, and there's nowhere that that can go there or back now that we have that back epoxy bar. So we rough this up, just a piece of carbon plating that's going to go in the inside of there. I really like this design. Off we go. All right, there you can see we have our washer on there at an angle, so we're going to go ahead and fish that into the bracket and we're going to cut that off there. So that'll stop it from going that way. The nose, when we bolt it on, when we cut this, will stop it from coming out this way. We have a nice tank hold down. There you go. You can see what that looks like. I like it. We're going to pop that back out. We're going to put a piece of styrofoam up there in that nose, and we should be good with tank mounting. All right, guys, and there you have it. Brendan here at Gator RC. That wraps up this segment of the TopRc Model Odyssey build or assembly. 86-inch turbine jet Xicoy 132 Frsky receivers and servos for guidance. AR smoothflite gyro in this thing. Holy smokes, smoke system. Links to everything down below. This is my second turbine jet, so moving up out of the Sebart Mini Avanti. If you haven't seen any of that series, great jet to get introduced into turbines. You will find all of those videos on my Just Plain Crazy channel. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this segment. Again, links down in the description below for all of the gear that I put into this thing. If you enjoyed what you just watched, smash that thumbs up. If you're going to give me one of these because I'm so bad, definitely give me 2 of those. Like, share, subscribe. It helps the channels grow immensely on both the Gator and Just Plain Crazy YouTube channels. And we also share tons of great stuff. You will find all kinds of good information on the Facebook side of things as well for Just Plain Crazy and the Gator RC. And if maybe turbines aren't your cup of tea and you're looking for a nice balsa ARF warbird or even a composite warbird, Gator's a one-stop hobby shop, direct distributor for TopRc models, Seagulls models, and Sebart models. So I'm sure there's something there covered, uncovered, you can find a liking for. So with that being said, guys, I got to get on to the rest of this series so I can show you how it got to this point. So I'm out. I will see you later, alligator.